All right, welcome back to our next session here at the Responsive Nonprofit Summit. Now, for the next 45 minutes, I'm going to be talking about an experience I had on the front lines of the global phenomenon KONY2012. And I'm going to talk about the 4 pillars that helped accelerate KONY2012 to reach the masses and to spark our mission into a movement. So we're going to cover 4 key pillars. This is going to be a storytelling session. I'm really excited to dive into how we used hyper-personalization to scale and rapidly grow a movement. Long before responsive fundraising even existed, nonprofits have been responsive for decades, even 100 plus years, in the way that they connect hyper-personally to supporters and to donors. And we're going to talk about the 4 pillars that Invisible Children and KONY2012 used to accelerate impact through the KONY2012 campaign. Now, to level set, KONY2012 was a campaign that was orchestrated by the nonprofit Invisible Children. Invisible Children was working to end a 3 decades plus long child soldier conflict in Central Africa, where a man named Joseph Kony abducted children and conscripted them into his rebel group, the Lord's Resistance Army, in his fight against the government in Uganda. The conflict has since spread to several other countries, but we believed, and the International Criminal Court stated that Joseph Kony was the #1 war criminal, most wanted war criminal in the world. And so we put him up against the likes of Osama bin Laden, Adolf Hitler, and said, the world needs to galvanize our energy, our commitment, our passion, our dedication to justice to bring this man behind bars. Our nonprofit created a 30-minute video that went viral on March 5th, 2012. The video garnered 100 million views, $30 million, passed 2 bills through Congress, but here's the catch. Everyone that's heard about KONY2012 believes that there's a lot of misconceptions. It was a loud, noisy campaign. And there's a lot of misconception around, was it just a slick marketing campaign? And I want to unveil the curtain. I want to bring you behind the scenes on the 8 years of work, sacrifice, commitment that went into building a movement of young people on average between the ages of 16 and 24 that reached this message to a tipping point. And so what I want to ground you in today are these 4 key pillars. And at the heart of personalization is mission. And so first and foremost, we focused on awareness. We focused on autonomy of our staff, autonomy of our supporters. We focus on harnessing people's time and talent through volunteers. And we harness people's commitment to take their hard-earned dollars to help us fuel good. Now, what we're going to dive into in this session is these 4 pillars. If you only focus on one of them, right, the farther away you get from your mission. But when we work in harmony across our awareness, our autonomy, our volunteers, and our donors, we can tighten and hone in on how hyper-personal we are to our mission. So I want to recap. Our mission was to stop Joseph Kony, the #1 wanted man in the world by the International Criminal Court, who ravaged decades of war and terror across his country and surrounding countries in Central Africa. And we believed that if the world could galvanize their efforts to stop the #1 most wanted man in the world, there was no problem that our generation could not solve. And so we tried to push our generation's efforts towards this one issue. And so the mission became Stop Kony. And as we looked to generate awareness, that was our true North Star. We started with awareness first. And so, where this actually starts for me, I want to rewind the clock. Because this story didn't start for me in 2012. This story started for me in 2007. And I read a book by Elie Wiesel. Many of you might have heard of it. It was called Night. And Elie Wiesel is a famed Holocaust survivor who went on to become an incredible human rights activist. My friends and I read Night by Elie Wiesel, and I grew up in Connecticut. Well, his office at Boston University was just a quick hour's drive away. And so my friends and I hopped in the car, we drove up to BU, and we went and knocked on his office door. And he let us in. And he poured us tea, and we sat down in his office, and we told him how moved we were by his story, his triumphs, what he overcame, his commitment to justice. But when we left, he asked us something. And Elie Wiesel asked my friends and I went through something decades ago, but there still persists incredible injustices against humanity that are pervasive in our world today. Don't walk out of this room without doing something about it. I want to know what you want to do. And that started a long pen palship with him. And we kept him updated on what our next action steps would be. So my friends and I started to say, where are we going to hone in? What is the pressing human rights issue of our generation's time that isn't being talked about in the media, that isn't being talked about in the news? What are we going to do about it? And a friend of mine walked into class with a DVD. And on the DVD, it said Invisible Children, the rough cut. And she said, we have to go to the auditorium right now and watch this film. So we go to the auditorium. I'm 17 years old. I'm a senior in high school. I just had a transformative experience meeting the author of this book that impacted and changed my life. And I sit down to watch a movie, and I heard a news story. I heard a story about a boy named Boney who happened to be the same age that I was. And he was abducted by Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army. And I'd like to show you a clip from that film so that you can hear from Boney firsthand.
So you study every night here like this?
Yes. Yeah.
You do your homework?
Yeah.
You share your homework?
Yes.
But you don't cheat?
No.
No.
Yeah. We used to go and eat mangoes in the forest like that without fearing the rebels, because in a day we cannot fear, but in a night we can fear. At night we can fear those rebels. Yes. Oh, for me also, I fear to sleep at home. His name is Ojok Robinson.
Jack Robinson?
Yeah.
Is he a good friend like Tony to you?
Yeah, he was my best friend, like Tony, which I don't know where he is now. Maybe he's dead or alive, I don't know. No.
When you were abducted,
Yeah.
he was with you.
Yeah, we were abducted with him. When I think of him, sometimes I can even cry. But nowadays, I cannot cry. Because if I feel of him, my heart will only be beeping like this. So instead of crying, my heart will just keep on beeping like that.
And so these are my friends and I at 17. After hearing Boney's story, the Invisible Children film ends, and they asked us 3 questions. Are you willing to use your time? Are you willing to use your talent? And are you willing to use your money to help end this conflict? And it was the first time in my life that I was truly, truly on fire. I finally had a purpose in my life at 17 where I thought, we cannot live in a world where kids like Boney sleep in the streets, do their homework at night in the dark, and sleep in UN-protected city centers because they fear of being abducted by a warlord in their village. That is not the world that I agreed to live in. And so this small group of people said, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to fundraise. We raised $20,000 on our first fundraiser in 7 hours. Mobilized our community, educated our community, and we wrote our first check to Invisible Children. So Invisible Children started by just raising awareness. They educated me on the problem. They were relentless in their message, and it was simple. It was easy to understand, and it was easy to understand my part in it. But what was so powerful about their message was they forced me to inspect my own humanity. They forced me to inspect my role in this world and this life and what I was going to do with it. And when they grabbed my heart like that, they showcased how to solve it. They showcased the solution. So I went off into college, and for the next 4 years, I kept fundraising for Invisible Children. By the time I was 21, I had raised my first $100,000 as a student, and I accepted my offer letter upon graduation to join the organization. So I want to spend some time deep diving into awareness. How did Invisible Children use hyper-personalization to build deep levels of awareness to create a cultural tipping point like KONY2012? And what happened was, after that first film was created, they asked another question, and it's the one I've already iterated. Do you believe in a world that exists where children are abducted at night in their sleep and indoctrinated into war? And all of those around the filmmakers said, we don't believe in that world. We believe in a better world. And so what we did is we got in vans. These vans you see here. Every 3 months for 100 days, volunteer advocates between the ages of 18 and 25 worked for free, fundraised their own salaries, and booked speaking engagements at high schools and colleges and places of worship around the country to spread awareness, to spread one single message. And it was personal. It was very personal. I remember I was on stage once. I was speaking at a high school in New Brunswick, Canada. And the presentation ends, and a young boy, probably 15 years old, his name was Michael. Michael rushes the stage out of this audience. And he's crying. And it's an all-school assembly. His whole school's up there. We just showed him a documentary film. We educated the school on how they could make a difference. And he comes up to me crying, and I pull him backstage, and I sit down with him. And he proceeds to tell me that 6 months ago, he lost his brother due to suicide. And he's crying, and he heard Boney's story. And he told me, he said, today is the first day since I lost my brother that I feel like I have a purpose. Can you believe that a conflict halfway around the world helps someone realize their own capability and potential? And so I stayed in touch with Michael. And that kid went on to raise $7,000 for child legacy high school sponsorships to put former child soldiers back into school. Amazing. Hyper-personal. Because what happened was, when we got in these vans, I'm going to try and go back. When we got in these vans and we went to schools around the country, we connected one-to-one, and we told young people, you matter, your voice matters, and you can do something about it. So we educated, we raised awareness, and we mobilized. And these are pictures from several of the schools. I spoke at over 300 schools over the course of 9 months and spoke directly and built relationships with over 75,000 young people. And I was just one team of 20. Over the course of 8 years leading up to KONY2012, we built one-to-one, hyper-personal relationships like we did with Michael, with 4 million young people. You matter. Your talents matter. Do you believe in a better world? We do too. Let's go arm in arm. And so that leads me into autonomy. We educated, we raised awareness. But what did we do? The powers that be at Invisible Children, our founders, our CEO, our executive staff, they didn't say, we're the talking figureheads. They brought in full-time volunteers who were 19 years old and said, we're going to make you the expert. We're going to make you the voice of the movement. You know what you're going to do? You're going to go talk to 50,000 young people in the next 100 days, and you're going to make sure they know how to be the voice of the movement. Autonomy. We created autonomy in our staff. We helped supporters become advocates. We were actually teaching history, right? Like the way that we got into high schools is we were actually meeting the parameters of history education curriculum and using that to mobilize. But we also gave autonomy to our beneficiaries. Dr. B touched on this morning in our opening keynote. Give away your power and elevate the voice of the local hero and expert on the ground who has the lived experience to know how to solve the problem. And this is something that people don't know about Invisible Children, because when KONY2012 went viral, we lost control of our own message. Because every time we went on stage, it wasn't actually me giving a talk. I introed a film, and then I introduced a Ugandan advocate that traveled to the United States to volunteer and tell their own story. And so, 6 years after hearing Boney's story, I led a team, and I was told that I would be going on the road with Boney, the boy whose story inspired me to even start on this journey. In this photo you see here is Boney and I on the same stage in the same auditorium of the high school where I first saw a film and his story. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. But that is the power of when you close the gap between your mission, your donors, your supporters, and your advocates, your beneficiaries. And with Boney, I formed a brotherhood. This guy is my brother. I welcomed him into my home. He met my family. And we have a long-standing, beautiful friendship. And I never thought in a million years that I would meet Boney. Fate plays interesting tricks. And so we generated awareness, we educated, we gave multi-layered autonomy to our staff, to our supporters, and to the peoples whose voice mattered most. And then what we did was we said, your voice matters. And we started with your time and your talent. So we told people, above all else, your time and your talent matter. Your voice matters. We need your time, and we need your community. This is a photo of 10,000 people who gathered at the Washington Monument to demand that our government do something about stopping Joseph Kony. Your time matters. Your voice matters. This gathering was coupled with one-to-one. You'll see a theme here, hyper-personal. We matched all 10,000 of these people with their congressional representatives, and we booked meetings with them. And we demanded from our government a commitment through a bill to put up a reward for justice for Joseph Kony, $5 million bounty on his head. And we demanded that our State Department give funding to programs on the ground that would rehabilitate child soldiers. But we didn't ask any of these kids for money. We just asked for their voice. And we told them that it mattered. And what did it result in? It resulted in 2 major pieces of legislation being passed through Congress in a historic piece of legislation that gave more funding to a community in Central Africa than the US government had ever given before. Because 19-year-old, passionate, dedicated young people showed up and said, my voice matters. So now we move on to funding and donors. So fun fact, a couple stats I want to throw at you. It might amaze you to know that the average age of our donor was 16. 16 years old. I have been a recurring donor to Invisible Children. I remain a recurring donor to this day. I've given $3 a week since I was 17 years old. Simple, actionable, accessible. I was educated. I was empowered. I had autonomy to mobilize my community. I was asked for my time before my wallet, and I gave my wallet freely. $3 a week since I was 17 years old. I watched young people like Michael. I'm no exaggeration. I know young people at the age of 20 years old that raise more money through peer-to-peer fundraising than any check that a major donor could ever write. I've seen 17-year-olds raise hundreds of thousands of dollars because we started with awareness, autonomy, and time in order to elevate fueling the funding needed to accelerate the impact and change that we wanted to see in the world. So when you come forth and you say, you know, our recurring giving model at one point was called TRI, T-R-I, and we would say, give peace a try, donate $3 a week. Simple, easy, but it was a great way to say that every dollar matters. Every dollar matters. I could go to a major donor or a major philanthropist and they could write a $50,000 check, but I could also mobilize Michael to get him and 50 of his friends to also fundraise potentially $50,000. And so we built this movement where I watched young people and adults see the value in their own gifts and talents to building a better world. And I had a transformational shift as a fundraiser during this time. I came so on fire for the mission. And about 2 to 3 years in, I put a sticky note on my desk. And the sticky note said, the money has to match the size of the dream. Now, the size of the dream wasn't actually stopping KONY. Stopping KONY was just one step to a 10-step process. I wanted to see child soldiers and child slavery eradicated from our planet. Joseph Kony was just the first domino in my way. And so I came for the mission, but I stayed for the donor. Because what happened was I was building relationships with both young people like Michael. Another wonderful opportunity I had that changed my life was I had the chance to moderate and facilitate our Celebrity Advisory Council. So on Tuesdays, I'm working with Michael, helping him mobilize his community. And then on Thursday, I'm in meetings with major philanthropists and people of influence. And I started to realize that I could define a common denominator. And I realized that what was most personal, what was most hyper-personal, that tore down any barriers of influence or celebrity or of being an unknown student who might wake up on any given day with pain on trying to navigate the hardships of life. They were united by what was personal to them. They were united by their passion, and it is what humanized fundraising for me. So as a fundraiser, I was no longer enchanted by influence or money or philanthropy. Because the only thing that I cared about was how do I educate you to be aware? How do I give you autonomy to advocate for our mission? How do I get you to elevate your time in order to fuel funding? Because this cause and what we're trying to do is personal to who you are. Personal to who you are in the fabric of your DNA as a human being, in your values, in your beliefs, in your upbringing, your family life, and what you want this world to look like when you're gone. All of that factors into the moment someone gives their first gift. All of that factors into the first time someone says, I can get 10 friends to give $3. What if I could get 50 friends to give $25? I was able to define a common denominator, and I showed up for the mission, but I stayed for the donor. Because the greatest fulfillment that I actually received as a fundraiser was that I could help be a coach and a mentor to help people that wanted to see a better world actualize that impact. That was the greatest gift that I received as a fundraiser, and that's what made fundraising personal for me. The other point here is when it comes to funding, Invisible Children did an amazing job translating dollars to impact. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories. When KONY2012 went viral, people saw the film, people saw a narrative, but people didn't have as we lost control of the narrative, right? We made the ask simple. Watch the film, share the film, tag your celebrities, sign a pledge. We didn't ask people for money. We still raised $30 million. We still grew our recurring donor base from 5,000 to 75,000 in 5 days. But we didn't ask for money because we were trying to advocate for a broader solution. But in the simplicity of our message, the power and complexity and impact of our programs was lost. And so you might hear things on the internet. Invisible Children is a fraud. Invisible Children is a scam. KONY2012, that's just clicktivism. That's not real. That's not real activism. That doesn't make a difference. People didn't hear this part of the story. And so there's a few things that we facilitated at Invisible Children. We set up programs in the Congo to actually create channels of communication with the rebel group and with the child soldiers. This is a picture of a man in a helicopter with Bose speakers strapped to it. And we had an early warning radio network system where communities could alert rebel attacks. And we used data mapping to track the rebel group. We would then launch these helicopters, and in different languages from where children were abducted, we would message them instructions that they would not be harmed, they would be safe, and here's how you safely defect to the United Nations. Coupled with those radio messages, we dropped biodegradable flyers from airplanes. Safe for the environment, biodegradable, don't worry. We would drop these flyers from airplanes over the movements of the rebel group. Now, this is where the donor comes into play. Because when these flyers fell, it would give step-by-step instructions on one side to help a child soldier or even a rebel commander defect. And on the other side was a map of key safe location sites where they could be received. And so you saw people like Apondo come out of the bush, laying down his AK-47 and holding up the flyer. And on that flyer was a code. And our early warning network would input that code into our CRM from a field office in Congo. And on the development side, I could look at every fundraising campaign connected to that code. And I could send a picture of Apondo to every donor and say, he came home today because of you. We closed the gap between the donor and our mission. And we celebrated the heck out of it. We did not let one defection go unnoticed. We hung banners in our office. We created welcome home celebration videos. We shared it with our donors and our beneficiaries. We created time to pause as a team to make sure that our field staff could zoom in and tell us about what the reconciliation process was like. So once someone defected, they would get entered into the only child soldier rehabilitation center in Congo. Once they were fully rehabilitated, we would actually have a reconciliation and a forgiveness process to help them transition back home. We would locate their families, give them mentor support to integrate back into the community, and give them funding to go back to school and rebuild their lives. A full cycle of rehabilitation directly connected to every dollar and to every donor. And so when you do that, that's when you hit a tipping point. Because a lot of people think that KONY2012 was a slick marketing campaign. But it was hundreds of people making sacrifice, living out of vans, to build relationships with 4 million people. And the 4 million people that we engaged led to over 100 million views of our message, our programs, our impact in 5 days. Our goal for the year was 500,000 views. We hit 1 million on day one. So when people saw the film and we gave clear calls to action, we said, sign the pledge. So we actually delivered 3.5 million physical pledge cards to the halls of Congress. And we said, the people have spoken. We do not want to live in a world where people like Joseph Kony can continue to get away and tear apart communities and families like this. And this message was spread and shared in over 200 countries. Every single media conglomerate uttered the names Invisible Children in KONY2012. We entered into the highest of offices in our country, and we danced in some pretty cool spheres of influence. But we only got to do this on the shoulders of young people that believed in a better world, because we drove awareness, we gave them autonomy, we mobilized their time and talent, and we told them that your dollar matters, and we're going to tell you why. And we're going to show you, we're not going to tell you. Because it's personal. Your hard-earned dollars are personal. Your time is personal. The precious moments you have on this planet, your friends, your loved ones, your hardships, your downs, your ups, losing loved ones, it's all personal. There is no greater gift, in my opinion, than working at a nonprofit. It is the greatest gift I've ever received. Because it allowed me to harness what was most personal to me every day when I woke up. I didn't have to check out. And each one of you that are watching, you show up every day. You're using your time and your talent. Many of you are probably underpaid and overworked and burnt out and tired. Your time and your talent and your message is worthy of grand awareness. The people that want to advocate for you deserve autonomy to do so on your behalf. People are waiting in the ranks to help you. Give them the autonomy. Mobilize volunteers and ask people for their time and their heart and their voice before we ask for their money. The money will come. The money has to match the size of the dream. So we have to think bigger. We have to dare greatly. The money will come. There is enough. There's enough time. There's enough resources. You are enough. You have enough. I was 21 years old when I worked on KONY2012. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was that my heart was 5 feet out in front of me. My family thought I was crazy. You're going to go work for free for a year and fundraise your own salary? What about the college education? I said, Mom, Dad, don't worry about it. I know. I have a feeling about this. This thing is going to be the fabric that ties the story of my life together. And it still does. I am here at Virtuous because of this. I am literally at Virtuous because a colleague from Invisible Children introduced me to Gabe Cooper. Come on. If that's not fate, if that's not personal, it matters. You matter. I'd love for you to take a screenshot of this screen and just think through, where are you indexing your time and talent and resources? Are you over-indexed on donors but tight on autonomy and awareness? What's the simplicity of your message? How are we mobilizing? What is the ask? Are we timing the right ask at the right time to fuel more good? So I'd love for you to take a screenshot for this, and if you want to talk through any of it, my email is Bryan, bryan.funk@virtuous.org. I'd love to have a conversation with you. I'd love to know how I can help. Because at 21 years old, I got to go shoulder to shoulder with my heroes. I got to meet a boy named Boney that changed my life. I didn't think in a million years that the two of us would forge a friendship half a world away. But the story of a boy, and that boy, Boney, he had the courage to speak up. He had the autonomy to stand up, to raise his voice, to sacrifice his family, to come to America to share his story. That's vulnerable, that's brave, that's hard, that's triggering. That's not easy. And he changed my life forever. And that story continues in eternity through all the work that you do, the connections that you have. It's possible. At 21 years old, I believed anything was possible. And we shared that belief, and it was contagious. And we lit a small group of people that believed on fire to create a cultural tipping point, the most viral video in the history of the internet that brought our world to a standstill, to inspect our own humanity, and to question, what is our part in this? Because it's personal. And it's the same for you. It's the same for your mission. And so where I want to end is, I actually want to read you a portion of a letter that I received from our board of directors 5 days after the film went viral. And I hope that the message applies to you. On behalf of the board of directors, I want to reemphasize and refocus the attention to the majesty and absolute phenomenon that your organization has pulled off. I know right now it feels like you are moving through a storm, but 20 years from now, heck, 5 years from now, everyone involved will get the joy of looking back and realizing that you made magic. You have broken the sound barrier. You architected and stewarded the most viral video in the history of the internet. The big, hairy, audacious goal of 500,000 views became 90 million in days. Every major and minor news outlet has uttered invisible children in KONY2012 repeatedly. But most importantly, you made the children and their hardships, once invisible, now very visible. People who never cared or even knew to care now care passionately. And that's why they signed your pledge, it's why they shared your video, and it's why they're supporting you financially. You have made the man who has been the #1 war criminal on the International Criminal Court list since 2008 the most wanted man on the planet, so says CNN. You did that in an organization made up entirely of young people who care, who are willing to work and sacrifice for what you know is right. No Madison Avenue marketing agency or public relations firm could have done what you've done. No billion-dollar brand has done what you've done. No media conglomerate and no government has done what you have done. You have made history. You have made the world stop and take notice of the issue and inspect their own humanity. In support of or even in debate, you have directed the attention of the majority of the planet on your single issue. We will never be the same. If you continue to keep the faith, keep leveraging this fantastic momentum and awareness that you have, you are in the midst of rewriting the narrative of history. And I know those sound like inflated words, but in this case, based upon the phenomenon that you have architected, you absolutely are. Now is the time to have more positive passion, more energy, more confidence. Don't let the critics tear you down. Your cause needs your resilient heart, mind, and fortitude of will. Your generation is at war, and you are winning. Keep fighting the good fight. The better future for all of us, particularly those in Uganda, Congo, Central African Republic, and Sudan, need you to fight vehemently. We as a board of directors are honored and privileged to be a part of this in the smallest way, and we support you 110%. You have more positive passion, energy, and confidence in your cause. Own it, harness it. Your cause needs you, your resilient heart, your mind, your fortitude of will. We see you. We see your sacrifices. Awareness, autonomy, time and talent, and money will flow if we can harness our ability to be responsive and to make it hyper-personal, because it always has been, it is, and forever will be. And the gifts that you give our world are going to change our communities for the better. And the magic of what we get to do in our life and our work is there is mystery in what we do. Because some of us will spend our entire lives working to solve an issue. Joseph KONY is still out there. He is still abducting children. You can go to lracrisistracker.com and you can look at the real-time conflict mapping from those radio towers I talked about. There were abductions within the last couple weeks. But the mystery is believing and knowing that what you did and what you chose to do matters in the grand moral arc of what we're trying to achieve together. So thank you for attending the Responsive Nonprofit Summit. Thank you for doing what you do. We're so proud and honored to support you. And we can't wait to see what will come because of your passion and what you harness moving forward.